Hi, this is Kannababu. This is part 1 of SQL Server FAQs. In this video, we will discuss about what is the difference between SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio. So here, SQL Server is a relational database management system that was developed by Microsoft as a database server. First of all, you must know what is database server. Before that, we must know what is data. Data is nothing but collection of raw facts. Data means it may be anything, it may be a number, or it may be a character, or it may be group of characters. Anything is called as data. A photo or an image or a video file or audio file, anything is called as data. Generally, whenever we want to perform any operations on data, first of all we need to store the data. So data is collection of raw facts. Data is collection of raw facts. So whenever we want to perform any operations on data, we need to store the data. So we can store the data in two ways. One is we can store the data temporarily, that is on RAM, and similarly we can store the data permanently, that is in our hard disk. So if you want to store the data permanently, then we have to go for what? We can go for files or database, but there are some lot of problems in our files. So we'll take the support of what? Database. So SQL Server is a database server. Database server means the place where the data is saved permanently. Database server is not user friendly. We cannot directly interact with the database server. If you want to interact with the database server, we need to install one software, that is client application. So what is SQL Server Management Studio? SQL Server Management Studio is a software which is used to interact with the database server. So here database server means the place where the data is saved permanently. This is your database server. In database server, the data will be saved in the form of what? Table. Here the data will be stored in the form of table. This is database server. Is it clear? So now, if you want to store the data in the database server, that is nothing but this is your SQL server. It is a place where the data is saved permanently. If you want to save the data permanently, means if you want to do any operations or manipulations on database server, like if you want to store the data or retrieve the data or insert the data or delete the data or update the data, you need to learn one language. That language is called SQL. So what is SQL? SQL is a query language, structured query language, where you can pronounce as SQL. SQL is a language which is used to interact with SQL Server. Don't confuse with SQL, SQL Server Management Studio. All these three are different actually. SQL Server is database server. SQL Server Management Studio, it is a software which is used to write the queries. Which queries? SQL queries. And through SQL Server Management Studio, we can interact with what? SQL Server database server. So Oracle is also a database server. MySQL, SQL Server, these all are database servers. Database server is not user friendly. We cannot directly interact with the database server. If you want to interact with the database server, you need to learn one language. That language is SQL. For example, if you want to write a C program, we'll install Turbo C, a software. If you want to write a Java program, you'll install Edit Plus. If you want to write a C#.NET program, you'll install Visual Studio Editor. And if you want to write one program, one environment is required, one software is required to write some programs. Similarly, in order to interact with the database server, here one environment is required, which was given by Microsoft, that is SQL Server Management Studio. When we install SQL Server Management Studio, within that SQL Server Management Studio, we can write the SQL queries to interact with database server, that is SQL Server. So here if you observe clearly, here I will show you something like, I will try to open my Visual Studio Editor, go to all programs, there you can say installed SQL Server. So how can you confirm whether SQL Server is installed or not? Go to start and here you can type what? Services.msc, press enter. Here you can see, you open services.msc, there you can find, you can see SQL Server, MS SQL. Actually whenever you install SQL Server, whenever we install SQL Server, two files you need to install. One is client, other one is server. Here, whenever we install SQL Server, our SQL Server is available in the form of service under Windows Services. So how to open that service means just go to start and type services.msc. Services.msc. MSC, then this window will be open. And within this window, here you see one option is there, SQL Server, MS SQL Server, and here right click on this and you have to start the server. By default, this SQL Server will be started backgroundly along with OS. Whenever you restart your system, by default OS will start what? Your SQL Server. I will try to right click and what? Start the server. So now I am trying to start my SQL Server. Is it clear? Now this is the database server. Now I want to interact with the database server. So I will try to interact with the database server through Management Studio. So go to Start, All Programs. There you can see SQL Server 2008, SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio, it is a software which is used to interact with the database server. We can interact with the database server in two ways. One is by using Windows authentication, other one is by using SQL Server authentication. When you connect to SQL Server database using Windows authentication, it is not required to mention the username and password. When we want to connect to a database server using SQL Server authentication, we have to mention the username and password. Here the username is SCA. SCA means System Admin. Password I will give ABC. At the time of installing SQL Server, it will ask you an option called Mixed Mode. There you have to set what? Password and username. Now it is asking me to give the server name. Server name means what? The name of the server where your SQL Server is installed. See here, you don't confuse SQL Server Management Studio. Both are two different softwares. I installed SQL Server in my computer. So what is my computer name? So if you don't know your computer name, right click on your computer, go to your properties. There you can see your computer name is Kanna. That is my server name. Server name means the place where the database server was installed. As database server is installed in my machine, I am giving the server name, or you can give IP address, or if server and Management Studio both are located in same machine, you can give what? Local, or simply you can give dot. And I am using SQL Server. I can use for different services like SSAS, SSRS, SSIS, as well as database engine. But mostly we are using SQL Server like a database engine. Those who learn MSBA, Microsoft Business Intelligence, they will focus on SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services, SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services, SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services. For time being, I am using SQL Server like a database engine. So I will try to give the password, click on connect. Means I am connecting to database server through my SQL Server Management Studio. You may get one doubt, sir, why to interact with the database server? Why? Because to perform some operations, like if I want to store the data in the database server, or if I want to retrieve the data from the database server, or if I want to perform any operations with the database server, then definitely we have to write some queries. Now I successfully connected to my database server. For example, again what I will do, right click on services. Here you see SQL Server. I will try to stop the server. Once when I try to stop my database server, I cannot interact with what? My database server. Here you see you will get something like a red color icon has appeared here. Now again you can what? Connect. Again it is asking me to enter your username and what? Password. I will give my password. Now I have given my server name, username, password, everything perfect. Now when I click on connect, it will display an error message because the server is what? Off. Through SQL Server Management Studio, I cannot interact with the database server because I stopped my server. Backgroundly my server is not running. So you will get an error saying that a network related error, a network related or instance specific error occurred while establishing the connection to the SQL server. It is telling that you are unable to connect to database server. The server was not found or was not accessible. It is telling that verify the instance name, that is your server name. And it is intimating you that SQL Server will allow what? Remote connections also. Check your server name properly. So again I will try to right click on the server, start the server. I will try to start the database server. And again I will try to continue with my Management Studio. And if you want to interact with the database server, your server must be what? Started. Click on connect. Now successfully we entered into our database server. By default, SQL Server will be started by OS. Whenever we try to restart the system, by default OS will automatically start this what? Service. Means at the time of installing, if we keep the option as automatic, then it will be automatically start. Manual means we have to manually start the server. Now we are eligible to interact with what database server. We can perform any type of operations. For example, I have one database with name MyDB. Here I have one table called what EMP. If I want to view the EMP details, I will write the query select star from EMP. Now this is which query? SQL query. So SQL is a language which is in order to interact with the database server, we need to write one query. That query we will write in SQL. And to write the query, we need one environment, that is SQL Server Management Studio. Now select the query, press F5. It is telling invalid object name because currently I am using master database. I want to use which database? Use MyDB. My database name is MyDB. Now currently I am in MyDB database. Now I want to execute the query. Now it will display the employee details. Now if, for example, if you try to see, right click, I will try to stop the server. Once when you stop the server, we cannot write the query. Now again I will try to execute the query. No, you will get an error saying that a transport level error has occurred while sending the request to the server. Is it clear? It is asking you to check your server name. Here automatically what came? This red color came. Again it will ask you to what? Login. Is it clear? As my server is stopped. So again right click, you can what? Start the server. So here you must have this clarity that what is the main difference between SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio and SQL. Is it clear? SQL Server is a database server. SQL is a query language which is used to interact with the database server. In order to write the query, we need one software. That software is SQL Server Management Studio, which was given by Microsoft. So these are the different versions that are available in SQL Server, which was released by Microsoft. The first version is 1.0, which was released in 1989. The name of the version is SQL Server 1.0. Similarly 1.1. 4.2.1. Actually SQL Server became popular from 9.0 here, that is SQL Server 2005. Next 10.0 SQL Server 2008. Next version 10.50 SQL Server 2008 R2. 11.0 SQL Server 2012. This version number is 12.0 SQL Server 2014. The latest version is 13.0 that was released in 2016, that is SQL Server 2016. So these all are the different versions that are available in the SQL Server. I hope you understood what is SQL, what is SQL Server, and what is Management Studio. Is it clear? For more videos, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel as well as Facebook group. Thank you.